Four divisions, four hosts, all battling it out for the Holy GrAHL of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy GrAHL Podcast with Andrew Rinaldi, Dina Weinheimer, Jeremy Paul, Michael Liu, and Zach Power.
Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Field Pass Hockey's AHL podcast, the Holy GrAHL. Andrew, we are now 25 episodes in. That's such a crazy number. We're now old enough to book a rent-a-car and not get the young driving penalties. If you're looking for information on ancient relics, folklore, or Monty Python talk, you're in the wrong place. Here at the Holy GrAHL, we're all about everything American Hockey League and the yearly race to the Holy GrAHL. Before we get too far into it, I kind of alluded to it. We're a two-man show here tonight. A little down on the penalty kill, but I know that we're a strong PK at that. I'll introduce the other co-host.
Yeah. I keep saying you're always in the right place when you hear this voice, and that voice is that of Andrew Rinaldi. I am the beat writer for the Chicago Wolves and Grand Rapids Griffins here at Field Pass Hockey, and 25, Darren McCarty, and we're a quarter of the century the way there. I love it.
I think he was forever 25.
Forever.
I don't remember him ever being any older than 25. That's Zach Power. We got a great show coming up here, and I know that there's a lot to get to, especially in the close playoff race. We'll have more on that in the standings in just a little bit, but we got a little bit of breaking news to kind of begin off the show with. The Chicago Wolves forward Josh Leivo was suspended for one game for spearing Texas Stars forward Ben Gleason in Sunday's 5-3 loss versus Texas, and he'll miss the first game Wednesday versus the Stars. I mean, it was a pretty ugly incident. I do have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously the beat writer for the Wolves here, and you always want to stick up for your guys, but I mean, oh, Josh, that's not a pretty look. And, I'm sure he'll say the same thing as it's something that, just kind of happened at the heat of the moment, but you can't do that. And he's got his one game sussy, which would have been yesterday's game against the Stars. Well, we'll see how that turns out, but it's tough. I mean, his nickname Showtime, he shows up in big moments, and the Wolves are going to miss him for that one game. But you feel like kind of with how their roster's built and their next man up mentality, it's, unfortunate that they're going to miss him for a game, but I think Chicago will be all right. They already got that X next to their name and everything. So yeah, but keep the stick down, Josh, please. I'm sure we'd all appreciate it.
And you brought up a really good point too, that I was kind of thinking of as well, is, this is kind of the better of times to kind of do it as well, just because on the base fact that they have that X next to their name, they can afford to lose a couple of games. Obviously, you don't want to go too crazy on things, but hey, why not? Speaking of some other winners of greater things that were awarded, besides suspensions, March award winners for the AHL Player of the Month, R2 Russalainen. I definitely butchered that. We don't have our encyclopedia Jeremy with us. He's the Rookie of the Month, going down to Pyotr Kochetkov. Yeah, I definitely did my research on this. And Goaltender of the Month is going to Charlotte's Joey Daccord. Now, Russalainen began this month with back-to-back goal efforts on March 2nd versus Syracuse as a part of a three-point night as well, in a 3-2 overtime victory on March 4th in Belleville. He tallied 2 goals on March 9th versus Laval. And then he authored a 7-game scoring streak when he began with an assist and a game-winning goal in a 3-2 decision against Utica on March 12th. Russalainen notched a goal and assists with the 6-5 victory over Cleveland, and just multi-point effort for him. Now, Kochetkov with the Rookie of the Month went 7-0-1 with a 1.74 goals against average and a 9.37 save percentage for Chicago in that month. Daccord, the AHL Goaltender of the Month, 6-1-0 during his 7 starts. I mean, lots of good names on there. Andrew, especially coming from Chicago as well, and they've really been kind of relying on some of those key players.
Yeah, I know I've spoken a lot about Kochetkov in episodes past, but I can't emphasize just on from day one his confidence and his swagger as a kid, kind of coming over, from Russia and having to adapt to a whole new culture, a whole new style of the game. I mean, having to change up your goaltending style with the smaller ice and everything. And this kid's just he's battled in the crease. He's chirped the other bench. He almost got in a goalie fight on Saturday, and thanks a lot, Stripes. But I mean, he's just exuding that swagger that's made him just a fan favorite of the Chicago fans since day one, since he stepped into that crease. And when he's not eyeing down the competition, looking to scrap, he's at the top of his game, stopping pucks. And I mean, just look at the numbers. I thought he was going to be goalie of the month, let alone rookie of the month. And Decord just kind of had to one up him with just slightly better stats. So I'll give that one to him. But
yeah, I mean, 239 shots saved of 250. That's an outstanding number. You alluded to it, 1.55 goals against average and 956 save percentage. And so we're kind of seeing two ends of the spectrum. Decord does have a lot of veteran experience that he kind of brings to the AHL. He's pretty young, obviously, but, not to say, but going against Kochetkov, we're kind of looking at, it's hard, and that's one of the biggest things that a lot of players will kind of talk about between the NHL and KHL is just the size of the ice and the style of the game. It's two totally different styles of game, I find that there's a lot more puck movement in the KHL. It's a very ping-pongy kind of match. It's not like the speed and skill that you're going to try to deke through a couple defenders. And that's kind of a big thing, is just they're just trying to get pucks in on net in the KHL and beef up that save percentage. So definitely good.
I think it's more like side to side with that open ice. You see those cross seam passes going through a lot more in the KHL than you do here. I mean, the power play, the puck movement's kind of similar, but right, even strength. And I don't think you get kind of the traffic in front and all the bodies banging and crashing in front of your crease. So for Pyotr to kind of, in his first game, literally took a knee to his face and got caught up. And it's been incredible to see his response as such a young kid. And I mean, he has the draft pedigree of being a second round pick and being a part of Russia's junior team a couple of years ago. So, I mean, it's not like he's just this came out of the backwoods of Siberia or something. I mean, he's had the talent and he's performed overseas, but now it's being broadcast to a wider audience here in North America that this kid can play. I mean, he just got here in February and he still hasn't lost a game in regulation. You can attribute part of that to the dominant team in front of him, but even Alex Lyon and A2 Makiniemi, they lost games every now and then, and this kid's just like, I think I'm all set on that.
Yeah, they're definitely in quite the I don't want to say a bad situation, but what are you going to do with all that goaltending? It's almost a shame to kind of have these guys sit on the bench for what it's worth. I mean, Alex Lyon has been absolutely fantastic. And, how do you kind of turn that around, right? And that's another thing too, is that we kind of Russell, he brings such a depth and presence to the Americans, and they really need that in a North Division that's been so tightly contested. I mean, Chicago, it's great that they have all the great players, but when you need those players to kind of step up in the North Division or the Atlantic rather, that's where things kind of really show.
Yeah, this is the time of the year where your Andrew Podorowski's of the world, they don't necessarily, I mean, professional hockey players show up every night, but he doesn't need to be that kind of dominant force that he was earlier in the season. Whereas Rochester is going to need their big guys to be those big guys as each game just becomes more and more important for them, especially in that division. I mean, it's so tight. And I can't believe that a team like, we've said it before, a team like Rochester earlier in the season, you would have told us that they'd be fighting for their playoff lives right now. I would have recommended some medication for you, but here we are. And we've been hearing a lot of Jack Quinn and Michael Mersch, and they got to keep up their style, but everyone else on that roster has got to elevate, or they're going to be sitting. And we've seen Ruotsalainen, he's done his part over the last month. Is love to see him keep it going. I mean, Rochester's they got a lot of fun pieces. I'd hate for them to miss out on postseason play.
Yeah, a lot of great golfing in upstate New York.
It's warming up.
it's warming up. But and then that's the big thing is, a team isn't built on 3 solid guys. And that's the big thing that we kind of see with Rochester is like, okay, well, they have other guys that they can kind of look to. We alluded to it earlier. Josh Leivo out. Okay, well, we'll just turn to one of our other 6 scoring leaders that we have in the top 20 right now, right? Like, bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean, right? There's
get the idea. Yeah.
Every category. There's somebody who's really good, whether it be player of the month or goaltender in the standings, right? So that's a big thing. Another kind of big news that kind of this week, the American Hockey League announced that today that Utica Comets forward AJ Gear has been selected as the player of the week for the week ending in April 3rd. Now, he posted 4 goals and 6 assists through 10 for 10 points for the past 4 games for the Comets, and he tied his high with 4 points on Monday night, recording a goal and 3 assists as Utica spaced a 7-3 victory at Hartford. The great game, by the way, if you missed it. On Wednesday, he registered his second career hat trick of the season, scoring 1 goal in the power play, 1 shorthanded, and 1 at even strength. Maybe almost like a Gordie Howe hat trick in a sense. It set a career high with 9 shots on goal with a 4-3 loss against Rochester. A really tight game as well. A 5-3 victory in Syracuse. He had 3 assists. Like, this is the kind of play that we kind of been talking about that Rochester has been needing. They, and this is on the Comets, which is all the more better is because they've been pretty solid, but they've had their moments where they've slipped, and it's a tight North Division, and they haven't secured their playoff spot yet.
Yeah, I mean, they grabbed all the headlines at the beginning of the season with that incredible run to open up, but honestly, it's not that they've been fading, I don't think, but like it's I don't want to call them mediocre by any means, but pedestrian, I guess, would be a good way to call it. And they've been known for their defense and their goaltending all year. So when you got a guy like Greer playing the way that he is, it's just gravy for a team like the Comets. And maybe I think maybe some adversity would kind of be exactly what the doctor ordered for them kind of heading into the postseason, because with that huge hot run that they were on at the beginning of the season, they were kind of able to just coast for months at a time. And even with kind of how they've fallen off, they're still pretty comfortably in that number 1 spot. They haven't clinched yet, but they're not too far off. They're sitting over there number 1 with a .685 point percentage. Second's there, Laval at .568. And so, you figure with 13 games, the Rocket would really have to forgive the pun, but rocket up there in order to catch them. And I just don't see it. So maybe Utica kind of needs a couple of those, cold buckets of water in the face to really kind of get them going, get them playing to the same kind of hockey that they were back in, October.
Well, that's the thing. A 5-5 record through their past 10 games heading into Tuesday. And I mean, I don't want to say that they've had a free ride, but I also like to think that if anybody else had that kind of record, through the past while, they haven't had an exceptional record through the past couple of weeks. And, if anybody else had that kind of record, they would be kind of thinking twice about their playoff lives. I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier, how quick it is that you can end up at the bottom of the division in the North or, close to it. or out of a playoff spot, right? And that's a real big thing with this. So having a player like that to be able to step up is great, and especially in the bid for kind of clinching a playoff spot. Speaking of, we have had a couple more since we spoke last, and a lot of them coming out in the Western Conference. And by a lot, I mean all of them. Chicago, Colorado, Bakersfield, and Abbotsford have all bunched their tickets to the Calder Cup playoffs. Up next is Manitoba, Utica, we're going to talk about. Charlotte all have the magic number of 5 and could potentially clinch it this week, depending on how things shake up. And I mean, for the Pacific Division, it's, we kind of look at a lot of those names are coming from the Pacific Division. So I guess that's a big part of how well it is. And, you kind of see it in the stat lines too, where a lot of the players in the top of the goal scoring and the point scoring are coming from the Pacific Division.
Yeah, I mean, we how much can we talk about, Stockton and Ontario all season long?
Yeah.
But, kind of forgetting in that fold sometimes is Colorado. And then you got Bakersfield and Abbotsford. I think in any other division would be kind of fighting for one of those top spots. But in the Pacific, there's just only so much room for all these good teams here. And I think it's a combination of you're getting some incredible hockey played at the top of the division here on one side. And on the other side, you got some really bad hockey that's being played on the other end. So when it comes to kind of clinching playoff spots, it's a two-pronged kind of approach where it's how many points that you've accumulated, also how many points the other team would have to get in order to reach you. So no, the Tucson Roadrunners and the San Jose Barracuda are just the epitome of basement dwellers. And just talk about a couple of poor franchises that just haven't been able to garner any momentum all season long. And that's so, that's a little bit in due to it, but I don't want to take anything away from just some of the incredible hockey that you've been seeing played out here in the Pacific. But you just look at how tight some of these races are out east, where there haven't been any spots clinched yet. And, we're less than a month out from the playoffs. And even your division leaders like Springfield and Utica, we know they're going to make it, right? But mathematically, they still haven't clinched. And you never know. A couple call-ups, a couple injuries, and you don't know what could happen to some of these teams. So I think it's a testament to just how these divisions are built and how close these battles are out in the Eastern Conference.
And I think that's the other side of it too is, and not to kind of wave my predictions already, but if we kind of seen someone like, say, Rockford or kind of Milwaukee or someone like that, I would be kind of nervous heading against someone like Abbotsford or a bottom team in the Pacific Division, just because of how tight it is. And that's really something kind of scary. Like, I don't know what would happen. And I really do think that Chicago would even have a good run for their money if Abbotsford were kind of roll in, or Bakersfield, Colorado, never mind Ontario, who's been struggling lately, or Stockton, right? So that's kind of a big thing as well.
You just look at how the playoffs are set up in the Pacific. Only the number one seed is going to have a sure thing in the they're the only ones with a bye, is basically what I'm trying to get at here. So even a team like Ontario is going to have to end up, playing a team like Henderson. But when you look down and you see it's just some two really good clubs and the way that they play and the way that they're built, and say, as of right now, it would be Abbotsford and Bakersfield. And they have 3 games to decide their playoff futures. That's just unfortunate, man. But that's just kind of the nature of the format this year.
For sure. And speaking of some big stick taps are going to Chicago. Sorry, let's start again. Chocolate City is celebrating 3,000 games. The Hershey Bears franchise collected its 3,000th victory this past weekend. They now joined an elite club of pro hockey teams that have included Montreal, Boston, Toronto, Detroit. Hockey royalty, if we've ever seen it, and such a storied franchise, and kind of goes unheard of a little bit on how long that they've been in the AHL. Especially in one city.
When I think personally AHL hockey, I think the Hershey Bears. I mean, you've kind of alluded to it. This has been a franchise that's been around since, before color TV was a thing. And,
Don Cherry played for them.
Exactly. That's how long it's been. And just the history behind it. I thought that stat in itself of, you think of the golden age of the original six and everything, and Gordie Howe and John Beliveau and, Rocket Richard, Bobby Hull, all that. And the Hershey Bears were just loading up wins in the AHL back then, and they're still doing it to this day. Maybe not to the capacity that some Bears fans would want it this season, but hey, they're still in a playoff spot. There's not much to worry about. So it's incredible when you look back on it, because I mean the history of this franchise coincides so much with the history of this league as a whole.
And that's the other side of it too, is you kind of think about the teams and the players who have come and gone. You've seen NHL coaches play their games in the AHL. You've seen, storied players who've gone on to do really great things for not only the Bears, but for other teams as well that you've had to roll into, teams up in Canada and down south, and, hundreds, I would say, right? Just like different storied players and teams and memories and moments. And, lifelong Hershey Bears fans, this is the kind of stuff that you kind of remember and remiss and think about, I guess, in 3,000 games. It's hard to kind of fathom that as well. And like you said, before color TVs and before, AHL was kind of changed the game that it is today. So it's definitely a cool sight. Another great sight, stick taps to Tim Mayer, who refereed over 700 AHL games in a career that finished up Saturday in Grand Rapids. I know personally, I remember seeing him down in St. John's, right? And so he's, and again, another kind of guy who's seen a lot of people come and go, a lot of things come and go. So big congrats to him as well.
Yeah, the 700 games. That's no slouch, man. He knows his stuff. It was really nice seeing Grand Rapids and Texas after a tough loss for the Griffins there, but they all kind of came out and had a big handshake line for him as they gave him a proper send off. That was some top class from the Griffins and the Stars.
For sure. And San Jose's Christoph Hrabic, I swear I can read, has been reinstated by the AHL following an evaluation of his progress and an education and training program to conduct in conjunction with the NHL's Player Inclusion Committee. I mean, again, we kind of we talked about it before, and we're not going to get too far into this, but it's it's good that we kind of do have that opportunity where we can educate people, right? And and just know that, hey, this kind of stuff isn't okay.
Yeah, this is the thing, because I think of course the initial reaction is like really, it was, I don't know exactly how long it's been, 30 days maybe.
It's been about a solid month and a half.
Yeah, okay, so probably longer than that, but I don't know kind of exactly how they measure, like how much he's learned, how much of his behavior actually changed, and how much of it is kind of just lip service and he wants to get back onto the ice. We don't know. Christoph is the only one who can speak on how genuine his feelings are on that. So, obviously it was a disgusting moment in this league that I don't think reflects on the league as a whole. It was more an individual who made an awful awful gesture. Whether he's truly remorseful or not, I again, that's up to him. But he followed through with the rules that the league put in place, and they gave him a second chance. And according to the AHL and the NHL and those who oversaw it, they believe that he's earned the opportunity to continue on his career, which I frankly thought was over after that. But I think that goes a long way in the saying, people, I think they do make these, it was a conscious decision to do what he did, and hopefully he has learned for it. I don't want to see someone do something so hateful and then just hang on to it. I hope he has learned. I hope he's grown as a better person, and I hope he changes from it. But it'll be really interesting to see if he matches up against Tucson later on this season, if there's any kind of retribution going on for him.
Yeah, and I would hope that's a little more than just watching a couple of VHS tapes and kind of getting it over with. And I probably should have done a little more research, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the same incident happened in the ECHL, and I don't think that player is playing in the ECHL anymore. And so, he really got I don't want to say a second lease on life, but this is definitely something that could have been a lot worse for him. And I really do hope that before returning to the ice that he's able to kind of, gather his thoughts once again. But yeah, on a much more appealing note, we'll switch over to our swipe left and swipe right. Swipe right is good. Swipe left is not so great. And we do have that super swipe. We get one a month. It is a new month since we've last dropped an episode, so we do get our super swipes back. I don't know how it's going to work now with the playoffs coming up, because I know I'll be kind of savoring mine a little bit, unless Andrew has a really nice profile for me to look at today.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And I think a big, I'm going for a big theme that we've done a lot in this show over the season, which is chaos, especially in the North Division. We're all rooting for chaos in the North, right? And you got to look no further than the Syracuse Crunch. And my hot take this week, I think Syracuse gets home ice advantage in the second round as the number 2 seed in the North, after spending the better part of the entire season on the outside looking in, because at this point, why not?
But you say it's chaos, but I don't think that they're that far off. And I say that because they've actually had some really good additions into their squad. And especially the way that ever since they picked up Nash, it's like, okay, yeah, we could actually do good and play good. I mean, when you look up and down the scoring race, you don't see anybody on there. There's nothing like overall like special about the team that says, oh yeah, I'm glad that they have this one player, right? Like that's not, it's like the little train that could. And I think that this is the way that the North Division is kind of going is this is the opportunity. I know that they have some big games coming up this weekend. I believe that Wilkes-Barre Scranton is in the mix, and as well as Lehigh Valley. So yeah, I think that they're going to get some points this weekend. There's not a whole lot of time left in the season. So yeah, I'll go for it. I'll give you the swipe right on that.
All right. I dig it.
See,
To me, you look at the rest of that division, everyone else is kind of hovering around 500, except, you look down the road in Ohio and Cleveland, but no, we won't go there. But Syracuse is, like you said, ever since Nash has joined that team, they've been just on a tear. And you talk about 7-3 in their last 10, and if that trend continues, it's going to be more of just who wants it more in the North, and everyone right now is kind of just treading water. It's just going to take one team to get hot to shoot up those standings, and then they're already there. They're number 3 right now, but I just found it funny that they were sitting at 6 or 7 almost all season, and now here they are with a chance to perhaps host a couple playoff games.
And I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong. They had Dumont or someone up in the the upper half of the leaderboard, and the only person that they really have in any kind of form is a rookie in Cole Kopecky, which he has 19 goals through the past 58 games, which is okay for a rookie. So, I mean, like, it's not like they've had that one guy to kind of say, hey, we're going to carry on our back, i.e. Chicago, right? Or I guess it's a pretty group effort there. But yeah, no, I do think that there's something to be said about Syracuse's play, and nothing's impossible in this day of the AHL, I don't think. And I think that following the standings all year long would kind of prove that nothing is impossible. We've seen Bridgeport even come into a playoff spot. Who would have ever thought at the beginning of the season we would have been saying Bridgeport had a playoff spot? They don't anymore.
Definitely not I.
They don't anymore, but that's beyond the point. I mean, they're not that far out. So the dating pool is kind of quite small, but and it's a small water take. But I think that nobody is shocked. And if you've been following it for any sort of the season, even after the second week, I don't think anybody is shocked that we haven't seen a true defiant person yet to kind of clinch a playoff spot in the North. And I say that because even after I say Utica, because I think after that 15-game win streak, they kind of cooled down a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. And I think that I would love to see the stats kind of from that 15-game win onwards, where it wasn't so great. So, and we kind of seen Rochester kind of be such a dominant force, and there was a time when Toronto was looking pretty great, and we seen moments of brilliance from even Cleveland. And I think that I think that this has got to be one of the last places that someone would look for a clinch spot.
Yeah, if you just kind of take it as a review of like each team throughout the course of the entire season. I mean, Utica obviously was really hot to begin the season, then kind of cooled off, and they didn't really have like a super low stretch, which I think is what has them so far up in that top spot. But every other team, Laval, again, kind of at the beginning of the season, they were kind of hovering down towards the bottom half of the division, to the point where you were concerned, like, are they going to miss the playoffs or anything? And then they were managed to turn it on, and now they're sitting there at number 2. We've talked about Syracuse, Toronto, again, just a lot of up and down. Rochester, well, it goes to say without that, fighting for their playoff lives down there at the number 5 spot. And even Belleville had rocketed it up to that number 3 and hovered around there for a week or two before, dropping back down here. But that's the thing with this team, is that it's all like you get one team that pops up and then they pop down. Another team will pop up and take their place. And then in a couple weeks, they're sitting on the outside looking in. And so without anyone, no one's, like I said, with concerning Syracuse, no one has really gone out and just grabbed a hold of their destiny. Everything's kind of just floating out by the wayside. Everyone's sitting at a 500 record, saying like, okay, who's going to be that team? I want it to be Syracuse to just kind of shoot up and take that number 2 spot and just establish themselves and be like, we're here. You're going to have to come knock us off when the playoffs come, and you got to come into our house and do it on our ice. And so I'm saying all this to say, yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all, with just everyone being up and down. There's been no decisive blows knocked out on anyone. So yeah, I'm giving this the right swipe, because that's pretty on point there, Zach.
And that's the biggest thing is when I kind of think about Syracuse as well, is that, for so long they sat near the bottom of the North Division, right? They were always clinging onto that second last spot, or they were down there with Laval and with Belleville, right? And that was kind of the way that the opening half of the season started. So I think that when we kind of talk about their style of play, this is their chance, right? Like, take this opportunity now and run with it, run with the ball, and that's kind of the biggest thing that we'll definitely kind of see as the playoff picture kind of turns into full swing. And just a reminder, we'll have all the coverage coming up as well for the playoffs this year. A bit of a shameless plug as well. And Alexander Ackerman has a really great Syracuse Speaks podcast. You can check that out on the Field Pass Hockey app, as well as Field Pass Hockey online as well, and all that sort of good stuff. So that's something to kind of look forward to in the next little while. Kind of looking at some of the scoring races, though, there's been a lot of good names up at the top of the leaderboard. And when we look at the top point getters and the top skaters, I mean, 3 points this week from Podorowski keeps him at the top of his throne, but we really need to watch out for TJ Tynan, who's really had a really great game. He's got 8 games in hand in the same amount of points, 85 each. Tynan with impressive 4 points last week. Looking up and down the leaderboard before we bring Andrew in, Podorowski is sitting at that top. Tynan's there, number 2. Nason, Seth Griffin, Marty Firk, as well as Kiefer Sherwood and Sheldon Dries, all down at that top 7 spot. I mean, for Podorowski, it's been a part of a magical year.
Yeah, I'm looking at 72 assists from TJ Tynan. That's just absolutely absurd. And that just goes to show where the Ontario offense is, their power is coming from. He's just feeding his line mates and just making it look easy. It's incredible. And Podorowski, it's almost when he's scoring and he's getting his points, he hasn't been scoring so many goals lately. Like when at the beginning of the season, I remember seeing all of his goals piling up, and it was just really atypical of his play style, as similar to Tynan, where he's just kind of drives the offense and looks to set up his teammates around him more than scoring himself. So he's certainly dangerous out there. I mean, he's launched a couple of bombs off the power play. One just rang off the post, I remember, on Saturday night. And, he's had some close calls, but when you got a guy like Stefan Nason on your line, on your wing, who's, just a sure thing in front of the net, you got to get the puck to him, and then you just let Big Tex take care of the work there. So we might see Potts number 2 by season's end. I mean, at the end of the day, just those, right, they're tied in points, but Tynan's played 53 games as opposed to Podorowski playing 61. That's just, it's incredible to see what TJ's done over there in Ontario. So I just like to point out, breaking through at number 10, it's a Rochester rookie. And if I would have told you that a couple months ago, you'd have thought, oh, that's Jack Quinn breaking the top 10 in scoring. But we have a newcomer here in the standings. It's JJ Peterka. And I know he had a huge weekend against the Cleveland Monsters, as I'm sure Dina's, writhing in agony over there listening to us. But I love what we've seen out of this kid lately. And I'm sure Rochester and the Buffalo Sabres do as well. And he's taken over Pelletier for the rookie point scoring race there.
Yeah, and he's been really a really great force to kind of be reckoned with. And I mean, when we talk about some of the prospects and players that can come out of Rochester, that's not one that we often really do talk about, is how well he does play. And to kind of circle back to your point about Tynan, I do, like, there's a time I remember. So I was in Toronto covering a game, and I remember, like, at that point, it was Jeremy Bracco who was kind of setting up everybody. He was the TJ Tynan of the AHL, just like ripping assists. And, I remember one time he passed across and he scored. And I remember there's a scout next to me. He yelled, "Can you believe, if he just shot the puck more, I bet he'd score," right? And, like, that's kind of one of the big, like, he was irate next to me. Okay. But, it was kind of one of those things. And I was thinking, I wonder what the coach is kind of saying to him. Like, hey, have you ever thought about shooting the puck on net? Or is it kind of like, hey, keep passing it across. If it works, it works. I mean, 13 goals and 72 assists is such a crazy number for me to kind of think about, especially at any player, at any kind of, we're talking like an assist or so per game, right? And these guys are all talking like 53 games played. And, we kind of talked about it a little earlier on a previous show, where I think it was Jeremy kind of mentioned, you got to feel kind of cheesed, because you got 85 points and you're tied for the first, but you're still like 8 games behind, right? And sure, that's not all completely to do with the schedules and whatnot, but it's something to be said about the schedules. Is there's a big difference in between some of the numbers, and we had the numbers at some point, and I had the numbers at some point,
Yeah.
but there's a bit of a difference as well. So to kind of see that come full circle is actually quite amazing. But I mean, to go back to your point, Paterka has really been a real great star for the Americans.
And if you want to if you want to have a mirror with Podorowski and Tynan, you only have to go as far back as last year, where Podorowski finished first in the league in points last year, but was that because he played 44 games and TJ Tynan only played 27? I mean, I think that's how the voters saw it, because your league MVP last year was 7th in league scoring in TJ Tynan. Now, granted, last year was a really mutant season that I don't know if we can actually pull any, viable stats or anything, but it's something to consider. This is not the first time that we've seen Tynan and Podorowski in this situation.
Well, and that's like the other side of it too, is like, not to go too far off topic, but when you kind of talk about stats from last year and comparing them, I mean, last year we were watching, the Providence Bruins just go out and just wax the Bridgeport Sound Tigers at the time, just over and over and over, right? Like the Atlantic Division was just like a scary broken record, and I mean, like, so if someone knows how to beat the goaltender in the Atlantic Division, do they count as top of the leaderboard? I mean, hey, I found this really great goal. If you go top right from the circles, you're going to score every time, right? And I mean, that's a big part of the game as well. So that's it's interesting how the record book will always have I don't want to say an asterisk next to it, but really should. But yeah, no, he's been playing really great for his team. Chicago also, speaking of players from Chicago, also dominating the goal category. Stefan Nason, who, maybe we don't talk about enough, 38 goals, and he's starting to round out that stat department with a 3-goal cushion. Sheldon Dries isn't too far behind either, just 3 goals in behind, and Marty Ferk rounds out that number 3 spot. And I mean, it's a part of this Chicago Wolves kind of run where they've had someone in the top in almost every department.
Yeah, they've been scoring goals by the bunches, and it's the big line that drives them. But I mean, it's not the only line. That's not it's a key to success, obviously, but there's certainly no slouches behind the top line in Chicago. I mean, talking about Jack Drury, you're talking about Jamison Reese has just been absolutely on fire lately. And Josh Leivo, we talked earlier, and maybe less lighter circumstances, but he's been another one of those heavy vet presence that has really, really pulled this team together. And, at times it's nice when your top line bails you out, but this team is just so deep, and it's reflected on their record. I mean, you don't get that far with just 3 guys carrying you the whole way.
Yeah, that's for sure. Kind of looking at the rookies, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but like Paterka had a really great week, a 3-goal week, helping out Rochester over some tough opponents as well. One of those including the Comets, and I mean, helping out Rochester slightly over the past few days. And he sits at the top of the castle. Michelli falling down a little bit after being out of lineup. Peltier still sitting just behind, but I mean, like, it's been this has been again another unspoken tight race, and to kind of see Paterka at the top of the lineup. Jeremy might argue with me, but I don't think it was somebody I was necessarily expecting to see at the top of the leaderboard to start out the season.
I mean, near the top, I can certainly see, but number 1, I think part of it was, as I know Jeremy's alluded to before, the mismanagement of Quinn, but part of it, I mean, is just this kid's gotten better as the season's gone on. He's gotten more comfortable, and as the games get bigger, he's rising up to the occasion and is kind of becoming the go-to guy for that Amerks team that's fighting for its lives there. So it'll be real interesting to see. I mean, you got one more month, and these are the biggest games of the year. So you got to see what Paterka's got left for us here. And I really like looking down at that bottom half of the rookie goal scoring or point scoring, I should say. I mean, Jack Drury's come up with the Wolves and has been incredible in his first season. Jonathan Berggren is really the only option left in Grand Rapids offensively after everything that's been going on with that team. So it's good to see that he's still succeeding. And I've been pumping the tires of Alexander Holtz all season long. So it's good to see that, I'm being validated looking at this leaderboard here.
And talking about the leaderboard a little bit, and we kind of talked about Jack Quinn earlier, 50 points in 34 games. Quick math would say about 1.2 to 1.3 points per game. In comparison, nobody else really is coming even close to that. Everyone else is pretty well a point per game player on that roster a little bit. So that kind of speaks volumes about how good of a player he is. I don't want to say that he's necessarily cheesed of the top rookie spot, but I mean,
he's been playing
really well. Looking down at the goal scoring, but that's where Jack Quinn kind of shines. He's only 3 goals behind Jacob Pelletier, and I mean, it seems like a bit of a cushion. Who's 26-3 more than Jack Quinn, but he's his second week back into the lineup, kind of thing, and that's going to be a real, test. Is can he kind of emerge himself near the top just shortly behind is JJ Paterka, Alexander Holtz. We've been pumping up his tires. We haven't talked a lot about Lucas Reichel, who's got 21 goals in the season. Getting over that 20 goal marker, that's a huge step, especially for a rookie in any league. That's kind of like the benchmark. Hey, you did pretty good for a rookie, right? So it's, again, another great sight to see.
And at number 12, Scott Reedy, who hasn't scored since November.
I don't think he's been in the lineup since November. But
I hope not.
He had some injuries at some time up in San Jose as well. And
yeah,
Scott Reedy was one of those players that I didn't know that he didn't score since November, because I've always kind of felt for him because he's stuck on a team that you don't necessarily want to be stuck on. But we kind of alluded to his stats earlier, and forgive me while I pull it up, but like Reedy's plus minus minutes have been like absolutely atrocious. And we kind of talked about it earlier. It's a part of a San Jose squad that has really been struggling to even find a win or anything like that in any sort of category. So he's a minus 26.
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, so Scott might want to get his PGA Tour card, because that would be immaculate on the golf course. But I don't know if that's what you want to see on the stat sheets in the AHL.
Yeah, it's quite atrocious. And I mean, he's in his games with the San Jose Sharks so far this year, he's had 21 games played, 2 goals, 1 assist, and a -6. So I mean, yeah, he's not necessarily a defenseman, I want to say, but those stats kind of matter a lot more. You can say what you want about the plus minus, but it's certainly something to be said when you have a player like that who's just can't seem to stay off the ice long enough to score. But again, it's a part of a San Jose squad. So when we kind of look at some of the other happenings in the AHL, and we kind of look at the goaltending stats, we alluded to it a little bit earlier. And can we just talk about Troy Grosneck for like just a second and a half? A 2.02 goals against average is absolutely insane to kind of even fathom. And we're not talking about over a short period of time. 26 starts for him. It's such a tight division of the Atlantic Division. It makes it all the more better. And the next closest GAA is Alex Lyon with Chicago with a 2.19. So that's kind of says a lot about how well he's playing.
That's only because Kochetkov isn't technically a qualified goalie yet. He's only been here since February, but I will give it to him. Troy Grosnick's been playing some lights out in the crease over there in Providence, and has really kind of carried that team through some of their struggles lately. I mean, I know in their last 10, it's not been pretty for Providence, but they're managing to at least, steal some points and some overtime losses and everything to at least get that much going. So we'd love to see some run support, is what we're saying in Providence. You have a goalie over here who could potentially steal a series for you in the postseason. But if you're gonna try and rely on 1-0 games the whole time, I don't think you're gonna come away with a winning recipe. But yeah, this is a guy. I remember there was a lot of goaltending questions at the beginning of the season for Providence. Was it John Gillies had to kind of come in and take a couple starts and kind of get that team going, get those first gears rolling at the beginning of the season. And now Grosnick's really, really taken over. And I think we got to kind of take a look at what's in the water and what they're feeding some of these goalies, or what this goaltending coach over in Providence is doing, because you look at what Jeremy Swayman's been doing up in Boston and his first year. And I mean, you look at his record in Providence, he was excellent. And it's seamless working up in the NHL. Well, I'm not saying Grosnick is the next Jeremy Swayman. Maybe I'm playing a little bit, but getting a little ahead of myself here. He's looking great. He's playing great. Providence, you got to help your boy out.
For sure. And I mean, you kind of alluded to it, and I'll throw it back to you as we look at the quest for the Holy Grail in the Atlantic Division. It's been a tight one.
Yeah. Hold up. Sorry. had to switch over there. I had to pull it back up. I mean, we got a few changes on right. We almost had Bridgeport and sitting there in a playoff position, but they're still sitting there.
That.
Yeah. almost sitting there at number 7, but we got number 1 as a familiar face that we've seen all season, Springfield Thunderbirds. But jumping up to number 2, those Charlotte Checkers, I mean, again, you want to talk about tire pumping, I'll just get me talking about the Charlotte Checkers for 20 seconds, and then, you'll be at a nice solid 36 PSI in all your tires, and you'll be feeling great. But they're playing some fantastic hockey lately. Springfield has as well. But number 3, Providence, with in their last 10 sitting at 3-3, 1-3. A lot of threes going on there, which is never a good sign for a hockey team that's trying to win its way into the playoffs. You got Hershey sitting there at number 4, also with 3 wins in their last 10, not looking great. And then you want to talk about even uglier, Hartford at 5, sitting at 2-7-1 over their last 10. It's a tough one for the Wolfpack there. Rounding up the standings, we got Wilkes-Barre at 6, Bridgeport at 7, and Lehigh Valley and their comfortable, familiar spot in the basement.
Yeah, and pumping the tires a little bit about Charlotte. You can check out some of their games on the Field Pass Hockey app, and don't worry, I will make sure that both of us get paid this week for all of the plug that we've given.
That is a Frank Gallagher shameless plug, and I love it.
As we kind of look into the North Division a little bit, good morning, Syracuse. Welcome to the party. They found their winning ways over the past few games, and they've moved up a few notches, but everything is still so tight. And notably, nobody has clinched a playoff spot, which we mentioned as well. And that's the same with the Atlantic Division. Looking up and down, Utica has been kind of struggling as of late. We talked about it earlier with that 5-5 record. Laval's kind of found some sort of a winning ways. Syracuse going down the list now. So Syracuse with that 7-3 record in their past 10. The Toronto Marlies not far behind. They'll play each other yesterday. Rochester and Belleville, as well as Cleveland, all the way down there with 3 wins through their past 10 games heading into Tuesday. They can't seem to find they're any kind of winning ways. And again, another shameless plug, you can the Monsters Musings comes out every Monday on the Field Pass Hockey Network app, and you can check out more on that there. But I mean, for the North Division, it's been such a tight race. We talked about it so much through the podcast that it's looking a lot better than the Central Division.
Yeah, and I just want to say straight up for Dina's sake, I don't think Cleveland is necessarily a bad team.
No.
They're just the worst in the division. They're
just vertically challenged, vertically being can't go up.
I like it. They just can't look up. That's all. So we're into the Central now, and again, you want to talk about just familiarity. The Chicago Wolves at number 1, as has been since the birth of Christ. You got Manitoba sitting there at number 2. Third, we got the Milwaukee Admirals, and you want to talk about a team again that was struggling a bit, I think, to find its identity at the beginning half of the season. We're talking, cement shoes over there in Wisconsin, all that cheese kind of going to their feet, but here they are at number 3. And I mean, there's some nights where this team just looks really, really dangerous. They took a nice little 4-1 victory over the Wolves on Friday, and they, responded on Saturday by getting stomped in Chicago to the tune of 6-1 in a game that the Wolves really looked like they were emotionally pumped up for and came out. I think there was some birds on the benches on Friday, a little bit of chirping going on that there's a team you don't want to give any bulletin board material to. It's probably the Chicago Wolves. But they're a really intriguing team to me come postseason playoff time. And another one is number 4 here, the Rockford Ice Hogs. I think that there's times where they look like they have it all together, and they look like they can be a dangerous team. I mean, you look, they're 7-2-1 over their last 10. They're not a bad club. They just kind of sometimes get that bad pig stench that kind of comes out every now and then, and they lay a couple eggs or get caught up rolling in the troughs, and it doesn't look pretty. But to their credit, they're in a race that is starting to get tightened up, and these points are coming more crucial. They're managing to eat up as many as they can. You want to talk about eating up some points. The Texas Stars have won 5 straight games and have finally validated me for saying this team is not as bad as their record indicated. Well, look, they're finally shooting up the standings, and I kind of love to see it, but then I look at the Griffins at number 7, who Texas went into Grand Rapids and smacked around for a couple of those 5 wins, and I'm like, maybe not so much. But as always, we have the lovable goons of Iowa and at number 6, and your new residents in the basement as of this week, the Grand Rapids Griffins. And it doesn't look like it's going to get much better out there on the west side of Michigan.
The last time that they let us be alone, which is a dangerous combination, we talked about how Texas is a lot better than, what their record indicates. And we've talked about it a bit on the podcast. We've had some writers on talking about it as well. And I mean, for the Stars, it's kind of like, about time you showed us that we're not completely crazy, because I do think that they are better than some of the names that we got coming up. And, I'll talk about a little bit that more coming up in our picks of the week. But looking at the Pacific Division, I mean, for lack of a better term, because the back end of the Pacific Division has been just god awful, like absolute like basement style material. Yeah, you thought that Milwaukee had cement shoes? Yeah, hello San Jose and Tucson. Come on, don't be playing me like that. That's no. Since we spoke last, couple more clinches as well. So Abbotsford, Bakersfield, and Colorado, we talked about how they were adding on to Ontario and Stockton. Still, the last few spots are up for grabs, as it were. But San Diego and Henderson looking like they're going to take playoff spots in the final 2 spots in that division. And boy, that is it's really been a division as we go up and down. Stockton has been really well, winning 7 of the last 10 going into Tuesday. Ontario had a little bit of a rough patch. The Eagles on fire, 5 straight wins, and that's really good because they weren't doing so perfect before that. Meanwhile, the Bakersfield Condors, talking about them, 6-3-1 record. Abbotsford 6-2-2 in their past 10. Going down the list, San Diego's actually been really well, and they've only had one regulation loss in their past 10 games, which is something unheard of. We don't often talk about how well San Diego plays. They seem to have these little spurts. Henderson, that new arena, the record isn't really there to show for it, but they'll kind of become hot once again. And then we have Tucson, has 11 games remaining. They have 20 wins, 31 losses, only better than the San Jose with 20 wins and 36 regulation losses, which is absolutely just a 3.67 percentage.
They're not even at 400.
They're not at 400, and we have teams who have won 75% of their games. You walk into Stockton and you'll lose 3 out of 4 times. Literally, they have a 0.75. That to me
that's incredible.
Godly.
Yeah. I thought Chicago was playing some good hockey, and they are, but wow, they have 31 regulation wins in 58 games. I mean, that's unheard of.
So not to rag on San Jose too much, looking at the top team. We better. Looking at the top team and the bottom team. So Stockton with 12 losses, San Jose 36, 3 times the amount of losses. They have double the amount of wins. Come on. What more is there to say? They've allowed over 100 more goals than Stockton.
100. Oh boy. 152 to 250. Oh, that hurts. I mean, good thing that the CUDA have like a really fire social media account. Like whoever runs their Twitter needs to get paid more than what it does. It maybe more than some of their players for the quality of production that's been going on, because there's certainly not a lot of W's going on the ice, so they have to create them off the ice, and they do it. I think I'll give them credit there. I have to. I need to like turn a new leaf. For every 10 bad things I say about the CUDA, I have to say one good thing. So you have a great social media account. All right, and now that that's out of the way, I mean, 367, is that a real number in terms of point percentage? And it's so unfortunate, because I think if you put them maybe, let's say, in the Atlantic, where they have their own basement dweller in Lehigh Valley who sit at 44, I think you might be able to pump a couple of those percentage points up, maybe get them over 400. But imagine, you're on the CUDA and you have like a 3-game week where you're looking at maybe a back-to-back in Ontario, and then you have to take a roadie out to Stockton, and like, that's just, you're just destroying these poor kids' confidence at this point. I mean, for some of these other teams, like even Henderson's really interesting, because I mean, you look up at what's going on in Las Vegas and all the injuries that have occurred up there. And, Logan Thompson started off the season backstopping Henderson to a respectable record in the Pacific. Then Robin Leonard goes down. Laurent Brossoit kind of isn't really the answer as a backup. So they kind of have to thrust Logan Thompson in, and he's doing really well up there with the Golden Knights. But all those injuries just depleted that team from competing in a division like this. Well, you wonder why they've gone 3-7 in their last 10. There's only so much room you can make up for in the roster, and it's so cutthroat in that Pacific. And if they sense a weakness like they do in the Barracuda or in the Roadrunners, they will eat you alive. I can't wait for those playoffs. I think that whole bracket is just going to be a war, and I'm all for it.
So we talked about Scott Reedy and his plus minus. The Field Pass Hockey stat department pulled up the beauty. Where he's not the worst in the plus minus on the team. In fact, he's fifth to last. There's 5 other players. Jonathan Bleichfield is a minus 41 on the season.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, man.
And they're looking down the roster.
He's their leading point scorer.
There is only 2 players that have more than there's only 2 players that have more than 3 actually that have more than 10 games played that have a 0 or higher plus minus.
Okay, so what
record.
that tells me is that, like, okay, so he's got the lowest plus minus, but he's also got the most points, and we're talking about Scott Reedy and his gargantuan numbers, but that just tells me is what that explains to me is basically that's a time on ice indicator.
Yeah.
What that's telling me is that Blichfeld has the most time on ice for the Barracuda, because it doesn't matter like where you're at in the lineup, who you're playing with, or anything. Every 5 minutes is a minus is really what it's boiling down to. And you got to score at an absolutely unbelievable rate. And granted, Blichfeld for a team that's under 400, I mean, he's got 22 goals, he's got 39 points in 55 games. It's not terrible, but
so that's another stat to kind of pad it as well. So if he's been on the ice for at least 22 goals, like that's just it kind of goes to say how much he's actually on the ice for in terms of opponents' goals, right? If by those standards, you're talking at least 60 plus goals that he's been on the ice for in 55 games.
You can we'll cut 11 of those off because those are power play goals.
Right.
Okay, so now you're looking at 11 goals scored even strength. So, and then 41. Oh.
And there's only 3 regulars that have a 0 or better plus minus on that team. So it's kind of scary. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
I think we put the knife in a little far.
I think we've twisted on all the CUDA fans enough.
I'm sorry. The stat did come in and I had to share.
Well, we're going to be talking playoffs for the rest of the month. So this is probably going to be the last CUDA content that you get in. So we made this one count.
Oh, did we ever? Until next week. As we talk about much more brighter things, there's lots of interesting games coming up this week in the AHL. Andrew, why don't you start us off in the Atlantic Division and who you're kind of going to be watching?
Yeah, I got Sunday's game. We got Hartford going into Charlotte. And, again, I always want to talk about the Checkers, but for a minute, I want to talk about the Wolfpack and just what happened to them. I mean, they were just once competing for the crown in the Atlantic maybe a month ago, and now they're just in a total free fall. Not only that, but they got a triple shot at Checkers this week in Bojangles Coliseum. I will say that name anytime I can. And I think Sunday's game is going to be the third one of the series, and it's going to be just huge in determining if the Wolfpack are going to be serious players in the Atlantic Division, or postseason play in this recent skid is going to be more indicative of who they truly are.
For sure. And I'll be looking at Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Syracuse, and more specifically Sunday. Wilkes-Barre is out here fighting for their playoff lives, and they're going against a team who's won 7 of their last 10 before coming into Canada on Wednesday. So for the Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, like it's not too long ago that you were just out of a playoff spot. So that's kind of a big thing that it's good that we're going to be looking at too, is, who's going to spill that last playoff spot. And, it could come down to the wire, but as of right now, they really need some points against Syracuse.
Yeah. As we move on to the North, I got Friday's game. We got Springfield going into Syracuse. I mean, I've talked about them before, but I'm going to talk about them again. The Crunch are just buzzing right now. They seem like they're pulling it all together at the right time, playing some really good hockey. And they host an opponent that's out of the division this Friday, but the Atlantic leading T-Birds. It's going to be a huge measuring stick for the Syracuse team to see where they are and how far they've come, and just kind of, again, it's all about tuning up for the postseason, seeing where you're at, and the more you get a chance at some opponents that you're going to be seeing that kind of caliber in the playoffs, you want to know exactly where you're going to be stacking up.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. I'm looking at the 1-2 in the North Division between Laval and Utica, and I mean, it's. I want to reiterate that nobody has clinched a spot yet, and neither of the 1-2. And it's possible this week, mind you, but like both these teams haven't really had the kind of records in the past 10 games that they've really wanted. They're pretty well even hovering around that 500 mark, and I know that they want something a little better than that. So it'll be kind of interesting to see who kind of comes out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. It's see if anyone can grab the momentum there. It's all futile though. Syracuse is really gonna pull out all the stops, I think. As we go on to the Central, we got another 1-2 here on Saturday. We got Manitoba going into Chicago, and really, just when you thought Chicago was done adding pieces with all the trade deadline acquisitions and everything, well, now they got a couple of young kids coming over from Europe, a couple of draft picks from Carolina from a few years ago that are just going to add even more firepower to an already stacked roster. You got Swedish sniper Noel Gunler and Russian center Vasily, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but Ponomaryov, I believe it is. I think these kids had the potential to push this team from incredibly dangerous to just outright absurd. But they're going to get a baptism of fire from the Moose, and they're not going to make it easy for them. That I can guarantee you.
Yeah, for sure. And hello, Texas. Do you want to confirm your playoff spot, essentially? Well, pound out Iowa real quick this weekend, and you shouldn't have any problems there. And you know what? I can't see why they wouldn't. The way Iowa's been playing over the past little while, and the way Texas, like, it's a pretty even matchup, but just looking at the way that they've been playing over the past while, like, this is a good chance to kind of put the final nail in the coffin for their playoff chances and getting that third to last spot. Go for it.
If Iowa can show some fight with anything other than their fists, then they have the chance to make it interesting. But if they're down 3-0 and Cody McLeod's just going to start throwing knuckles, then you might as well book your tee times now, Iowa.
Well, that's, sorry to cut you off, but that's a big thing about the AHL today. It goes to prove that fighting doesn't entirely work all the time in the AHL anymore like it did. Before, it was all like who can beat up the other guy and possibly get one in the net, right? Like now we're starting to see a lot more where it's a skill-based American Hockey League. So this is a good indication.
Yeah, I'll just go off on one little quick tangent here before we get into the Pacific. When Dina and I were in Traverse City speaking with the head of officiating from the ECHL, I just kind of, we have this mental image of the coast as just kind of this gong show league. And, where you got a couple of guys with skill, but for the most part, it's, it's mostly guys who are trying to do whatever it takes to get to that next level. And there was a lot of it in the AHL as well, where you want to showcase to your parent club or to someone who might offer you an NHL contract that you're willing to go out there and step up for a teammate who took a bad hit or just answer the bell whenever it's needed. Well, the game, as we've seen in the NHL, is just focused so much more on speed and skill, and it's trickled down into the AHL and incidentally also into the ECHL. Yeah, you're going to have your fights. You're going to have your guys who are there to step up. But if there's no more meatheads. If you can't play, you're not going to be on the roster. Like, you got no more guys who are there to play 2 minutes a night, just throw some knuckles, get the crowd going, and then sit on the bench. Those each roster spot down to that fourth line winger is just way too valuable these days. So I went on that tangent just to go and explain all that. Now, as we go into the Pacific, I just got 2 words for you. Stockton, Ontario. Is an explanation really necessary here?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, man, and I'm setting my PVR for that. These 2 heavyweights have been proved not to mess with. Ontario, a small stumble, 3 regulation wins in their past 10. We kind of talked about it before. The opposite of the Flames affiliate heading into Sunday, which is going to make for a great show. Speaking of a great show, Andrew, this has been a ton of fun. You know, they should let the penalty killing unit out of the box a little more and, 2 minutes for high sticking for the rest of the guys.
Yeah, you know, when you're down a man or 2 or 3, you know, it's all about who's got the most heart, who wants it more. And hey, look at us. We're just killing penalties, laying it all out there for the boys. So yeah, I love a little shorthanded chance every time I can get it.
Taking numbers and taking names. And that's it for this week's edition of the Holy GrAHL podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you really like this podcast, be sure to subscribe and, rate this podcast. Tell all your friends, tell your beer leagues, tell your Easter bunny who's coming up, and make sure you eat your chocolate now if you really like us. You can be sure to give us a follow on Twitter. Andrew, what side are you on?
You can find me at either FPH Wolves for some Chicago Wolves coverage, or if you're looking for a little more Edgar Allan Poe type style, you can go to FPH Griffins, where it's a little darker and somber and not as fun. Well, I take that back. It's still just as fun, only in the sense that it's fun if you like to watch the playoffs instead of actively participate in them.
Well, the good news is you won't have 2 playoff series to cover this year. So I'll give you, you can find me at FPH Marlies as well as the whole Field Pass Hockey crew on Twitter. Be sure to check out some of the other Field Pass Hockey's other great content, especially coming up into the playoffs inside the SPHL with James Hayes. Syracuse Speaks with Alexander Ackerman, looking at all things Syracuse crunch related stuff. The Monsters Music podcast with Jay Forrester and Dina Weinheimer, and they're looking at all things Cleveland Monsters stuff. And finally, the 3 Periods podcast with Matt Harding and Matt Will. From all of us here at Field Pass Hockey and the Holy GrAHL, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us, and have an amazing week.
This has been the Holy GrAHL podcast. Have a question or a topic suggestion? Hit us up on Twitter or drop us an email. For the latest news across the American Hockey League and the rest of minor league hockey, download the Field Pass Hockey app, now available in the Apple and Android app stores.